Welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. My name is Audrey Monkey, and I am your host. In today's episode, which is episode 7 of the podcast, I'm talking with my friend and fellow camp director, Sara Kuljis. Sara is the owner and director of Yosemite Sierra Summer Camp, as well as Emerald Cove Day Camp in Southern California. I so enjoyed talking with Sara in episode 3, and possibly if you've been listening for a while, you've also heard that podcast. In today's episode, we're talking about family, pace, and space, a topic that Sara does workshops on for parents all around Southern California. I hope you enjoy today's podcast. All right, Sara, I'm so excited to have you back on the podcast again.
It is great to be here. It's always such an engaging time, and I hope that tonight's conversation will really be helpful for those who are listening.
I really think it will. We've gotten some great feedback on our last one. So before we get started, one of the things I've been thinking about is we've talked about in the future having our own podcast. So what we really need to decide is if it's going to be called Salsa and Sunshine or Sunshine and Salsa.
Oh, I think Sunshine and Salsa, because the weather always dictates just what my snacks are going to be. So I'd put your name first.
Okay, the only problem I've decided with our name, though, is they might think it's about summer barbecue fare.
Well, we'll do at least one session about that then, okay?
Okay, because I was thinking, but just so listeners know, if you don't know our backgrounds, we're both camp directors, and at both of our camps we have nicknames. So my camp nickname is Sunshine, thus the name of my podcast and website. How did you get the name Salsa?
Well, because, one, I love Mexican food. Salsa is often red, which is my favorite color, and because while many people think I'm sweet and loving and also all the time, there's a little kick to me, so that's the name Salsa.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. That is perfect for you. So today, the topic that we decided to talk about is one that you have done some parent trainings and workshops on, and I think it's such an important topic, so I'm excited to talk to you about pace and space. And maybe first start telling us about how you think about that at camp in terms of what kind of pace you want at camp and what you kind of plan for your campers.
Thank you for that question. You know, a lot of times when we think of having our children be engaged in day camp or resident camp away from home, we think of all the activities and all the craziness and all the fun, and it's sort of a rather frenetic schedule. But when your feet are really on the ground and you're learning and growing with these amazing children, what we find is if their schedules are too packed, if there isn't time for sufficient reflection and rest and conversation, they aren't their best selves. Mm-hmm. Their learning isn't all that it could be. Mm-hmm. And so over the decades of doing camp, we have found that a moderately paced schedule serves our children better. Mm-hmm. And when we get to unpack the learning of the day, the joys and the challenges, mm-hmm. when we get enough rest, when there's enough time around the dinner table to have a meaningful conversation, it makes the excitement and the fun and the craziness and the activity all the better. And so it really is how we strive to run our own family too. Mm-hmm. It's a challenge not to get overbooked, mm-hmm. But at camp we are committed to be a well-paced program.
Yeah, and I think one of the things at camp, and one of the things kids enjoy so much, is the schedule is very set. And so when you can set the schedule like we can as camp directors and say, oh, you get to this point and it's rest time. And do you have a time of day that you call, like, do you have a downtime or a rest time?
We do, like you guys. After lunch, it's kickback.
Oh, great.
And then before bed, it's recap. And we really do talk through our day. And we get to bed at a pretty reasonable time. We sometimes get teased for that. But to have a good debrief at the end of the day and then sing the goodnight song and have a counselor read their children to sleep, we need to start that by 9:30. We don't stay up till midnight.
Right.
And like your wonderful camp, when campers are away from home, say for 2 weeks, they need enough sleep to maintain good health and good balance all the way through.
Definitely. And it's interesting. They would get completely burnt out mm-hmm. if we let them stay up till really late every night at camp. It's funny because I don't know if your kids do weekend camps or a few day camps with school, but they stay up really late on those programs. Like my kids always come back and say, "Oh yeah, we were up till midnight, or we were doing this," and that's fine, like you said, for a few days,
for a weekend,
for a weekend
sure.
camp.
Sure.
But for what we're doing, it would not work. We'd all be miserable by the end.
Exactly.
So yes, I think that is one of the things. I really feel like kids feel very relaxed at camp and very happy, and I think part of that is because they do have just a little bit of space to just reflect and just be. They're also not driving around. They're kind of walking between things, which also, even when you think about pace, they're not rushing in a car. They're walking or riding a mountain bike or something. So it's really interesting to think about camp and the pace at camp and how kids benefit from that. And then translating that into some lessons that we can use at home. So when you meet with parents and you're giving your workshop, what are some of the things that you talk about with them about kind of pace and space in their families? What are some of the lessons you want them to think about or questions?
Well, I kind of back up and I start with the research, because why bother slowing down unless there's a reason to?
Yes, definitely.
And there's so much fascinating brain research out there right now that talks about the challenge of overscheduling, the epidemic of sleep-deprived children and adults. The American College Health Association in 2015 said that 1 in 8 college students has either been diagnosed or treated for anxiety. They credited a lot of that to just so much pressure and a fast-paced life that they didn't just learn at college, but they came with from home.
Right.
The statistic is 40% of children, and this isn't young adults, this is children, are sleep deprived because of a packed schedule.
Yes.
That crazy life, that impacted schedule, often will lead to feelings of anxiety, pressure, discouragement, even depression. And then we have kids self-medicating, whether by overachieving or by finding, unfortunately, other ways to self-medicate, maybe through eating disorders or drugs and alcohol. There's prolonged effects from depression and that anxiety, and certainly these kids don't get to thrive and be their whole and best self.
Right.
And, frankly, we as parents may not be being our whole and best self either. So when I'm speaking with parents, it really is rooted in what the research is bringing out. And I challenge parents to look at their schedule. And, man, there are so many wonderful opportunities out in the world. I want the best for my kids, too. I can work too hard to provide all these opportunities. But, an opportunity doesn't mean it has to be had.
Right.
And so we look at, is there enough downtime for reflection and for rest, where those where my brain can rest and make sense of my learning of the day, where I can rethink what would I do differently, where I can catch my breath and remember who I am. So downtime, unstructured playtime where it's not directed by a grown-up, and then also that valuable family time. We still work really hard to have 5 dinners together a week, and with a high school kiddo and a middle school, I've got one in college as well, but man, it is hard to have dinners together, but we're utterly committed to it, and it's been fun to see my own children prioritize that.
Right. That's so neat. Yeah, that's all really good. I love especially the sleep thing. I've always been really crazy. My kids know that I just really am very concerned about sleep, both my own and theirs. And, anytime that one of these articles comes out, I share it with them. And those charts that show that how you actually need more sleep when you're 14 and 15 than when you're 12 because of your growing so much and all that stuff. So, and there's also, there's research of the links between obesity and lack of sleep.
Absolutely, yes.
And there's just so many things that just getting a good night's sleep could solve. Just as a side note, my daughter just got a job as a high school teacher for next year. Her school where she's working, their first class starts at 8:45 a.m. And
good for them.
And this is a trend. I also know there's a school where my niece is starting next year that starts late as well.
Brilliant.
And all of the research that's backed this, that, teenagers especially, their circadian rhythm is later, and so it's better to, they want to stay up later, fine, but they need to sleep later then. They can't be getting up at 6 a.m. because then they're not getting enough sleep. So the sleep thing is really great, and I love how you mentioned that at camp and in your family. So what are some of the kind of questions that you encourage parents to think about when you're giving them this workshop and they're kind of thinking through, well, how am I doing, and what can I do for my family's pace? What are some of the things that you ask them to think about when you're doing that?
The first thing I do is I ask them to look at 1 week of their family life, everybody's activities for a week. And if they don't have it on their phone or in their calendar, I ask them to write it down and just get 1 week down. Spouses' activities, appointments, obligations, work, sports, church, everything down. And once it's all down, I actually sometimes will take colored pencils so they can color code it if they have
fun.
Juggling a lot of people. They usually are out of breath when they actually stop and look at that week. They're pretty packed. And I ask questions like, look at the balance of the activities in this week. Look at what is school, what is outside of school, what is family, what is faith, what is sports. And I ask if the balance of those activities reflect their family values. It's actually a tough question because I first have to double check what my family values are. Do we have a value of service to others who are in need? Do we have a value of family? And when was the last time we went to visit Grandma just because? Do we have a value of high academics? Are we putting the right amount of time toward that, or is it mostly 10 p.m. to 2 a.m.?
Right.
That if I value academics, I actually don't want my teen studying during those hours.
Right.
And we just do an evaluation of if those activities, if that schedule reflects what the family values. The second question is really important, and that is consider the temperament, the interests, and the energy level of each of the kids in your family, and even yourself or your spouse. And do the activities that individual's involved with, does it match their temperament, their interests, and their energy level? Because what is right for one kiddo may not be right for the others.
That's actually really good. I think thinking about that, and that's also different from what we as parents might think.
Absolutely.
That's one of those things that's more, and again, how do you even know that for your child if they haven't had time to reflect a little? So you almost need, it's like a chicken and an egg thing, but without the chance to sit back and say, well, so take an activity, soccer or whatever it is, maybe you're spending a lot of time on that, without really checking in with them quite regularly. Well, how's that going? Are you still, how's your team? How are you really enjoying that? Are you really thriving? Is that just still such a great thing for you? Because even over time, something that maybe was very, fulfilling and great, when you were 8 or 9, maybe it's not as great anymore, and it not necessarily related to how well you're doing at it.
Oh, exactly. And I think if we can be internally motivated about what we're involved with, and not feeling the pressure of, everybody on the block is on that volleyball club team, so I guess we all better be on that volleyball club team, when that's not their sport, that's not their joy. They really love swimming, and that kiddo in particular doesn't have that competitive spirit. So have we part of a swimming community where they feel the benefit of others to swim with and to improve their skill, but maybe over the long haul, competition isn't going to be their thing. Right. Really that fear of being left out or missing out or not being better than, to put those fears aside and say, what is healthiest for my child, my family? What are our values? What kind of adults am I hoping to raise?
Right. But I think, and one of the things I think you've experienced is it's so hard because you feel a little bit like a parent that you're observing everyone else and what they're doing, and everyone else, their kids seem to be doing so much and doing all these things. So you feel like, I remember this feeling when my kids were little, like, oh my gosh, they're supposed to start playing whatever sport when they're 5 years old or they're going to be behind. Right. It was just like this really crazy feeling. And then, in hindsight, I look back and I'm thinking about all the sports that we tried for a few years and didn't end up being anything.
But wasn't it great to dabble in
those? Oh, yes.
Just for the joy of it.
Yes. Right. And I mean, especially, really fun t-ball and watching the kids all pile on each other and stuff. So, no, there's definitely, I love that. But how do you balance that? Giving your kids these opportunities to try, because people think, well, wait, we don't know what they might like. We got to try it all. How do you sort that out? Picking which things.
Well, that's a good question. I have a confession to make. I made a kind of guideline. I have 3 children. When they were younger, I made a guideline of everybody gets 2 things to be involved with outside of school.
Okay.
Now, that didn't count church. Our family's involved with church, and that was going to be what it was going to be. But besides school, they all could pick 2. I would encourage them to pick an art activity and an athletic activity.
Okay.
But over the long haul, that didn't match all of them.
Right.
But one of the reasons I had them each pick 2 on an ongoing basis is because that meant 6 activities for me.
Which was already a lot.
And, working full time and 6 activities for the kids and wanting to, run a home that was cohesive and not completely insane, which I haven't always done, but I really work at. And being a member of the community and a volunteer at school, that was kind of my limit, and that actually worked really well. There were times there might be a temporary opportunity that came up, a short-term project that was a 3 or 4 weeker, and yes, we could do that. But I have one friend, and their teen is on 3 club teams in 3 different sports. What a gifted child! But that family has sacrificed its whole self to meet the demands of 3 club sports, and I'm not sure they're happy and healthy anymore. Right. I continue to ask thoughtful questions, and they will find their way. Right. And I can't make their decisions for them, but that's a pretty tough schedule to handle with all the travel. And they've made quite a few personal sacrifices, and as well as sacrifices for the other kiddos in the family.
Another thing with that, I don't know about you, but when my kids are doing more than one thing, there's conflicts that come up.
Yes.
And that's like like my son is in a choir at school, and they had a trip, and then, there's a soccer game that weekend. And so these things come up, and I don't know about you, but it makes me very anxious to not fulfill my commitments, or my kids to. So if we're on a team, I feel like, if you're on that team, you need to be at the practices or the games. So I think that it adds a more anxiety and stress to the family when you have so many things that actually there are going to be conflicts between the things that you've signed up for. So I love your 2 activity idea. The other thing I really like about that is it's also helping your kids learn you can't do it all. So it's helping them from a very young age prioritize. And you're letting them do it. So you say, okay, so you want to do this. Your friends are also doing this. And you're interested in this. And you're interested in this. And you put them all out there. Here's these 4 things. Which 2 right now do you feel like are going to be the best things for you? And it's giving them kind of good training for adulthood that you've got to figure out your priorities.
Well, and you said something really key just now. You said, which 2 things right now?
Yes. Yeah. It might not
do you want to do it? Now, that might be a year commitment. And if we commit to a team or commit to a play or commit to guitar lessons or mentoring, tutoring, we fulfill the length of the time that we committed to. Absolutely. The full season. We don't quit early. All that stuff. But also helping a young person realize that if I want to play lacrosse as an 8th grader, it doesn't mean I must play lacrosse as a senior in high school. Right. There might be something else that changes for me. Right. And just, giving children the opportunity to have the courage to try something new and know that, these things aren't set in cement.
Right. And I think, too, especially with sports, I don't know if you've experienced this, but one of the things that I think happens is, I have a daughter who was really, really good at softball. She was a softball pitcher, and she was so, so good at it. Very gifted. Loved to practice pitching. Just very, very good about that. But it got to a point, and it was around 8th grade, where just the softball scene was just too competitive. The atmosphere, the stress, the coaching, it was just not fun for her anymore. So while she still loved pitching and was very good at it, it was no longer something she loved. And I remember just at the time going, oh my gosh, you're so good at that. and thinking, because I was never good at any of those kind of all sorts. So you think, oh gosh, don't give up this opportunity. But you know what? She really likes to play piano and ended up playing piano. And she's a beautiful piano player. And probably in the long run, piano is going to be a more fulfilling lifelong activity than softball. And she'll actually be great on her company's softball team. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
But it's interesting as a parent, there's like so much more involved than just your schedule. It's also, you get kind of caught up in, oh gosh, we can't stop doing that because they're good at that. Or we can't not do the 4 AP classes because they can do it.
Yes.
So that's part of this. So you mentioned to me before that sometimes when you're having these sessions, there's kind of people get kind of almost upset. Tell me a little bit about that. What's kind of some of this discussion that goes on?
That has surprised me. And it's actually been really good for me to kind of grow my empathy muscle around parents who've really invested a lot and sacrificed a lot to provide so many opportunities for their children, and then to be asked that really hard question, have you provided too much? Or is the amount of activity and the racing from this tutor to that lesson to that team to that leadership opportunity, and then getting home at 10 for the homework until 2, being asked that question is hard. It challenges my decisions around my kids' health and happiness, but I've given my all to provide that for them.
And worked so hard.
And so I understand there is pushback. What do you mean they shouldn't be doing all these activities? What do you mean that might not be good? What do you mean? And I think that I always want to say to all of us parents, we are all doing our darndest.
Yes.
We are all doing the best we can.
Yes.
The thought around considering pace and space for family is just to give us a moment to catch our own breath and say, is this where we meant to be?
Right.
We're doing our darndest, and are we on the right path?
Right.
We're doing our darndest, and together, are we happy in the direction we're going? And so I have become more gentle in my presentation, I think, because it's hard when we realize, gosh, maybe I got a little off track. Oh, but it was for the best purposes.
Right.
And it's okay to step back and take a breath and say, gosh, maybe we're going to make some changes here. And when our kids are older, we get to involve them in those decisions.
Yes.
And the number of children who said, thank you that I don't need to do equestrian and volleyball.
Right.
Or, Audrey, from summer camp, why do kids continually say, I'm my best self? I feel free here. I don't think that it's that summer camp is always nirvana. I don't think that. I think it's they have a better pace and space.
Right. They have a chance to think, who am I?
Yes.
What am I enjoying?
Yes.
What did I like today? I think, too, when you were talking, I just think, too, a lot of it is, like you said, our intentions as parents are so good. It's all about, we want to give our kids these great opportunities. And I think part of it is we didn't really, when your kid's a baby or you're getting started on these activities or whatever, you don't really sit down and make a plan. You don't sit there and say,
right.
You don't anticipate that you're going to be in 3 club sports or whatever all this stuff is. So you don't really know that. And so I think part of it is just taking some time, like you said, just to reflect about it is just a great first step. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to completely turn your family upside down.
Absolutely.
But even just thinking for a little while, just stepping back, having some conversations with, your family. How do they feel like it's going? And what is everyone, what are some priorities for us this year? Do we want to try to do a family vacation that doesn't revolve around somebody's
sports event,
right, or something like that. That's a good example of just let's think about some of these things. So you have a great questionnaire, and I'm going to actually attach it as a PDF to the notes from this podcast, so that if parents want to just take a little time to reflect on these questions and think about it, I think it's just going to be really helpful. And I think, again, not in a condemning way, because
not at all.
You and I both have also gotten into this same, I know for sure that I have had times with my kids where I'm like, what happened? How did we end up in all these things? And
how did we melting down?
Yes, and also when you become like you say we want to have family dinner, but then your child's on a team, and then lo and behold, the practice is on 2 nights a week during dinner, the normal dinner time, and then your other kid is on a different team and they pick 2 other nights, and so you end up in these conundrums where you're like, ooh, we've already committed to this team and now we have 4 nights a week, so in situations like that, I think, again, if that's their thing and they really want to do it, then we're committed. But I think part of it is then saying, okay, well then, if family time's a priority, when are we going to do our family time? Can we have dinner early? Can we have it late? Can we have a family tea time for dessert, maybe with older kids?
I met a family this year through one of these workshops. They have family breakfast Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Nice.
Mom and dad included.
Yes, great.
And because of sports, that's how they did it.
Great.
It's brilliant.
Yes.
And the kids, they get up early for school. Mom and dad don't go into the office yet, and they make breakfast together, and so it's a shorter meal.
Yes.
But they have 45 minutes, and
awesome.
That is their time. I think that was a brilliant solution.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's awesome. So that's the thing, too. I think part of this is just maybe, whatever, you just have to figure out your own thing.
Yeah,
if that is important, if family time is important, which I think it is, and, as, you and I both have kids who now don't even live at home anymore because they're off at college and beyond. And so, as you get older as a parent and you realize that, yes, indeed, these years are very short, I think that is a great thing to think about and prioritize. And I think it's just, again, just be gentle. I think we want parents to not feel bad about anything because, boy, we've all gotten
upside down.
Our whole culture has gotten us
Absolutely.
in this situation. Just the fact that practices are happening during dinner every single night of the week, is just an example of how it's kind of a hard thing, trend to buck by as a family deciding to do some of these things. But I also think, I'm sure you've heard from families some of the benefits of trying to make some changes. Have you heard feedback from people about any changes that have happened for their families based on trying to slow down the pace a little bit?
I have. I've heard especially moms who have said they are calmer. And, when we, as the mom of the family, if I'm in my sweet spot, actually everybody else is in a better flow. So that has been a gift. I've also heard of a couple children who, by cutting out a little bit, they have found their creativity again. One family told me that their daughter started playing piano again.
Oh,
she
wonderful.
took lessons when she was younger, stopped the lessons and is doing 4 or 5 other things, but as they cut out some things, she comes home from school and sits down at the piano.
Oh, isn't that great?
And her peacefulness and calmness has been helpful, and then just reestablishing some family traditions and rituals, especially as some of their children are launching off to college, has given a little more connectedness. Before they're off to their next chapter. So I hope that it's helpful, and I hope it brings more, just again, the best out in all of us.
Yeah, that's so great. Okay, well, I think since we've talked now for approximately 27 minutes, I think we could go on and on forever. We'll definitely do this again on the Salsa and Sunshine / Sunshine and Salsa show. But this has been great. Sarah, thank you so much. You have so much wonderful wisdom to share, and I will definitely put in the notes the link to your questions, and then also, especially for those of you in Southern California, Sarah can come and do this workshop and help you with thinking about your pace questions and how you can just bring a little more, peace into family life, because it's just so important. So thank you so much for being with me again. We'll do it again soon.
I can't wait.
I had such a great time talking with Sarah again for this episode. You can find notes from our conversation by going to my website at sunshine-parenting.com and search for episode 7. You'll also find a free downloadable PDF of the questions that Sarah uses with her parents at the workshops that she does in Southern California. I'm going to leave you with a quote that reminded me of our topic today. It comes from the late comedian Eddie Cantor. Slow down and enjoy life. It's not only the scenery you miss by going too fast, you also miss the sense of where you are going and why.